Now we're excited to hear from Congressman Cohen. And if you have questions, please put them in the chat or in the Q&A, and we will call them out and see. Hi, Congressman. What do you think of our presentation? Oh, wait, you're on mute, sir.
Y'all muted me, but regardless. The presentation was fantastic. Thank you to the three gentlemen and you also for making that presentation. It was the best thing I've seen since Sheldon Whitehouse yesterday. Sheldon did a miraculously wonderful job of explaining how so many of those people who have used the tax system and still want to use it more have taken over the court system and our government in general. This presentation goes hand in hand with what Sheldon was saying about hidden money and dark money and manipulation of the code. I learned a lot from today's presentation. One thing I was not sure about, you were talking about somebody, the slumps, I think it was the slumps, and how they were waiting for somebody to die to get the money. Was that Slump's daughter and she's going to have to wait to see her father die?
Well, in our example, Congressman Cohen, the slumps inherited money from the aunt.
My wife, she don't look old enough to inherit anything.
She's very well maintained.
Well, I saw the other day there was a story, I guess it was in the Times, all the good stories seem to be in the Times, but there was one about Trump being saved by a guy in Las Vegas in a joint venture they had in a hotel, and how he serious $20 million or something for nothing. And they showed Trump had introduced him to his wife, and they showed a picture of them getting off an airplane. And the only difference between the slumps and them is that the woman was not in a bikini. It was a Miss Ukraine who was only 2 years after getting her crown, and she was married to this Las Vegas millionaire. I hate to say it because he's probably only 7 or 8 years older than me, but a geezer who was getting off the plane with him. The code is written wrong. We need to do something. I think the Democrats will. I voted against, as all the Democrats did, the tax scam of 2017. And I'm one of the original sponsors of the bill we've got in now to put a tax on the upper 0.2% that have made so much money through this pandemic, and to put a billionaire's tax on them. And we've got to also, years ago, I ran into a guy, I was a state senator at the time, and it was probably about 2003 or 2004, somewhere around there. And this is a guy who I'd met when he was a lobbyist, and we were at Capitol Grill in Washington, and he told me he was representing 10 families. And he couldn't tell me who they were, but his only client was 10 families, and he had one bill he was working on. And it took me a while to figure out they were working on repealing the estate tax. 10 families hired a team of lobbyists to work on that and did it for like 10 or 12 years before they got it. The estate tax being wiped out is just a great cost to our government and a ripoff. And you see what Trump has done in the CARES Act. They slipped in at the last minute a carry-back interest provision deduction for taxes back to the year 2017, way before the pandemic, so they could get benefits like Trump, similar type tax benefits he got to pay his $750 taxes, and that's became law. And Nancy said she didn't know where it came from. It just all of a sudden it appeared on the desk at the last second. Mnuchin had gotten it in, and it benefits a lot of fossil fuel companies, but it benefits Trump and all of his fossil-aged friends. And it's just outrageous. It comes to billions of dollars. It'll cost the Treasury the first year like $90 billion, and the benefits go 80% to people who are millionaires, and the average benefit is $1.6 million a year. It's outrageous what's going on, and y'all need to get as many congressmen as possible to educate us. This is very informative, and shine a light on what's going on, and address the Democratic caucus when you get a chance. And hopefully there'll be so many people in the caucus that they'll have to have a larger room. We hope to grow this year. I went out to vote today, and this is the first day of early voting in Tennessee. The lines were the largest I've ever seen at 2 polling places I went to. People have been waiting for 4 years to vote against this tax criminal and every other kind of criminal there is. And it's good. I think we'll have a new day. But I thank you for having this presentation. I'm proud, I just appreciate it very much. Mr. Prince, you remind me of a friend of mine here named George Cates. I don't know if you know George Cates, but Mr. Cates' sons have done very well, Staley and all. But George is in Mid-America Apartments is what he got started. And I don't know if he's a member of your group. He should be. And he gives, as do his sons, a ton to charity, a ton. And they're very good citizens here. We've got some good millionaires in Memphis, and they would probably go on your team. You remind me of George Cates, a good man.
We, Congressman, so anybody on the phone or Congressman, we are always eager to recruit new members. There are 500,000 people in the country who make $1 million a year or more. Our level for membership is either $1 million a year of income or $5 million of wealth. And we only work on raising taxes of people at that income and wealth level and above. But out of the 500,000 people in the country who have that much money, we only have 200 members. So you see, we're really fighting an uphill battle. I mean, at the end of the day, rich people just don't want to pay higher taxes. And I think, as Stephen said early in his remarks, they have been advantaged for so long, I think they can't even see their advantage anymore. But what we wanted to do with this presentation is just show people how, just like out of the gate, you go to work, you do your part, you're putting in your 20%, 30%, 37%, and then these people with tons of money and these corporations with tons of money are literally, you're paying more to repair the roads than they are. So we've got some questions. Let's see, this is a fun one. Just let me know who wants to answer this. What's the point of raising taxes on rich people if they can just break the law and not pay taxes at all and get away with it? Morris, you like this question. Eric, you can go next. Morris, go.
Well, sure. Right now, some people are breaking the law and they may get away with it. If we change the laws, some people break the law and maybe get away with it. But we have to change. Most people do follow the laws. And most of what we are most concerned about, the things we complained about in our presentation earlier, are perfectly legal. And so, sure, we have to have more IRS enforcement and enforce the existing laws, but we also need to change the laws. Eric.
Yeah, I'll make 3 quick points about it. Number one is, we don't think just because we don't catch all murderers that murder should be legal, right? I mean, the fact that some people are going to commit crimes doesn't mean that we shouldn't have laws. Point number 2, and closely related, and on the topic of what Morris said, is the other thing Republicans have done is starve the IRS of enforcement resources. They really do. They don't want anyone to pay taxes. They prefer the whole government to just shut down. And so they're not interested in going out and raising even the money that people owe. They just don't want to do it. So with a change in Congress, we can put those resources back. It is absolutely clear that money that we spend on the IRS has a positive rate of return. It doesn't cost us anything. It generates revenue. And then the third point I want to make is, it is exactly the complexity of the system that the rich play so effectively. And my point that I keep harping on is the fact that investment income is treated differently is the biggest loophole in the world. And what the rich do over and over is figure out how to reclassify income so it qualifies for the lower rates. If we did away with that difference, 80% of the games that are currently played would go away.
Eric makes a fabulous point. Thanks for saying that, Eric. And I just want to clarify one thing. Technically, if you equalize capital gains and ordinary income, you could theoretically accidentally raise taxes on some people in the lower income. You can just write into the law for that preferential tax rate to end, above $1 million of investment. There are always ways to write this so you get the specific outcome that you want. Here's some more questions. So Congressman Cohen, I'm going to throw this one to you. So how do we make sure the tax code doesn't get worse? You make the point that the tax code was rewritten under Trump, but will it be better if Democrats win back the majority? And the point in the beginning of the thing was 70 years ago, it was 94%. Now it's 37%. 70 years ago, the estate tax exemption was like basically nothing. And now it's 22 million for a couple. So Representative Cohen, how are we going to make sure that this gets better?
Well, I think if we get a majority in both the Senate and they get rid of the filibuster and we keep our strong majority in the House and have a president, we'll be able to do a lot. And Joe Biden's made clear that there won't be taxes raised on anybody earning under $400,000. We're going to do like, who was that? Sutton, Willie Sutton. Why did he rob banks? Because that's where the money is. And that's why you go for your tax increases on people making over $500,000, and really over people making over $1 million. That's where you put your tax increases. So you create a level of a top rate and you make it at a higher level, and you tax people more at the higher rate. The progressive tax system structure can do that, and I think the Democrats will do it. We'll look at tax avoidance schemes, and there is a guaranteed minimum tax, or there was one. I thought we still had one, but it could be put in and made more effective to make sure people pay something and don't get away with the tax robbery that they do. Too much of that goes on, but we will see the taxes directed. What happened with the tax scam? Yeah, the people earning less than $100,000 got something, but they got peanuts compared to what the wealthy got. I think 60% of that tax advantages went to the upper 20% in income, and it was even more skewed towards the upper 2%. The idea that the Republicans and Trump care about the average person is a joke. They care about them having their particular concerns about a woman's right to choice, about a gay couple's right to get married. They care about that. They care about your right to carry a gun. And they do that, and they created a caste system, which Miss Isabel Wilkerson wrote about so well, that makes people think that they are in some privileged society when they're white. A lot of it's been based on race. And these same people have manipulated the tax code and manipulated people, making them think that they're going to benefit along with these rich people. Well, they're not in that caste, and because they share the same race, doesn't mean they're the same people.
So here's a good one. Wouldn't raising taxes on rich people lead them to spend less on charity? Morris.
Well, sure. I suppose that's possible. If you raise tax on rich people, they'll spend less on charity. But the amount they'll spend less on charity is far less than the amount that you'll raise in taxes. So overall, you'll have rich people spending far more money on the country through their taxes than they are in charity. When you make a charitable donation, the amount you save on taxes is only 20 or 40% of that charitable donation. So you're still sending out money. So even if that tax break went away entirely and people stopped spending money on charity, you'd still have far more money raised for the federal treasury than the amount of money that's spent on charity.
Also, if somebody wants to follow Anand Giridhar, who is a fabulous writer, you'll find studies have shown that the richest people in the country spend less on charity than poor people. And, you know, they always get these big accolades for what they're doing. The guy who just paid off the Morehouse, you know, all of the scholarships for the Morehouse people. Well, now he's in tax hot water. So like, as Morris always says, it's easy to get somebody to put their name on the front of the Lincoln Center with a charity donation. It's much harder to get somebody to put their name on a sewage treatment plant at 137th Street. We need some sewage treatment plants. So let's just tax them and get it done. All right, so somebody says, I understand that consumer demand creates jobs. Could you elaborate on that? Who wants to take that one?
Repeat that.
I understand that consumer demand creates jobs. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. Well, you know, I'm going to kind of come in it from left field, and that's the reason we're such big advocates of raising the minimum wage. Because if we could start putting money back into the pockets of the people that spend it, the economy is going to do better. People don't understand that the United States has driven 70% of the economy in the United States is driven by consumerism. People that buy a new house, buy new clothes, buy new cars, put tires on those cars, that's what's driving our economy. But if we're putting the majority of the money or an inordinate amount of the money into the pockets, I haven't bought a new car in a long time. I don't need one. I've got 5. I don't need any clothes. I was looking at buying a new shirt yesterday in a catalog. And I realized I don't have room to get my shirts back into the closets right now. So I'm not going to buy one. But why don't we put the money into the pockets of people who will spend it, which is the middle and the working class. It's absurd that we don't understand that. And we keep putting the money back in my pockets. I don't need any more money for consumerism. If there's something out there I want, I go buy it.
What I always say is that a guy who owns a business, like say the corner bar, what he's concerned about is how much beer money everyone has when they're walking to his bar on Friday afternoons, not how much tax he's paying and not how much the one guy standing behind the bar pouring the beer is making.
All right, here's another great one. This is one of my favorite questions. And Morris and I just wrote a book that's coming out in April, and we have a whole chapter basically that's dedicated to this. So what do I tell my friend who thinks a flat tax is a good idea? Morris, you just finished the chapter.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, a flat tax, I mean, a huge increase on the taxes for half our population. There's a huge number of people who are making so little money they can't afford to pay any more in taxes. You can't possibly get them to pay more. They don't have any more money. And it would mean a huge decrease in taxes for rich people like me. And that would be ridiculous. I would not, as Stephen was saying, me having more money would not increase the economy at all. I'm spending as much money as I can, and my wealth still goes up every year, not down. And I haven't worked in 6 years. So there was no logical reason why it would help the country to have lower taxes for me and higher taxes for millions and millions of people who are just getting by.
Eric, you want to make a comment?
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to note Morris has worked. He just hasn't worked for pay. Yeah, I want to say about this is that my view is one of the problems is a flat tax, okay, but on what? Let's go back to some of the things we're pointing out. I pay less on investment income than you pay on working income. I pay zero on what I inherit. What is so it's not just the rates, it's what do we tax? That is a big issue in our tax code. So people love simple solutions because the world is complex. If you can latch onto something simple, why wouldn't you? Taxes will always be complicated. The idea that you're going to make it simpler by simply making it one tax rate is flawed.
Just one last point on this. We go into a great bunch of detail in the book about this concept known as the marginal utility of money, which sounds kind of complicated, but it's basically like the more dollars you have, the less utility or use you get out of every additional dollar. So if you're a student and you're broke and somebody comes and hands you $500, you're so excited. You can pay your groceries, you can pay your bills, maybe you can go out and have, a drink with your friends that night, whatever it is. If I hand Morris $500, he tells this story about he opened a camera case that he hadn't opened in like a couple years and there were several $100s in it. He didn't notice it. When he found it, he hadn't noticed that he lost it because Morris has enough money that every additional dollar doesn't mean that much to him. So if you can't get your head around how a dollar is not the same dollar to everybody, picture yourself being extraordinarily hungry. Somebody walks in with a pizza. That first pizza is so delicious. But if somebody walked in with 1,000,000 pizzas, that 1,000,000th pizza, when you've already eaten, you're already full, you've got some in the freezer, some in the refrigerator, you've got pizza for days, that 1,000,000th pizza doesn't matter to you. And so a progressive income tax takes that into account. So taxing someone, for example, on their 11th $1 million at 70%, 80%, 90%, it won't really change their lifestyle at all. So that's another reason against the estate tax. I mean, the flat tax. All right, so let's see. How about, there are so many examples of how rich people carved out special breaks in the tax code to benefit themselves. What would it look like if we did the same thing for working people? So Congressman Cohen, what are some of the fabulous things that we could do for working people?
Well, there could be higher child tax credit that give you benefits if you've got children that you've got to pay for. And the child tax credit's an important part of the what we're doing right now with the HEROES Act. We're trying to increase the child tax credit to take care of people with children, working families, but the Trump administration doesn't want to do that. And they don't want to give back that $1.6 million benefit to the upper 80% that they got with that carryback interest. And that's one of our issues. But you could give more back in work for working people. You could raise the minimum where you start paying taxes a higher level. But the main thing I think is the child tax credit. You could do benefits on certain purchases that people have that are initial and necessary. Maybe your first house or different things like that. You can give credits to and take that into consideration. The idea of flat taxes makes as much sense as the flat earth, and probably the same mentality. It's just a scam, and it's taking advantage of people because of course those people didn't know any better either. But these people promote the flat tax do know better, and they're trying to take advantage of people.
Here, Cohen, Representative Cohen, here's one more for you. Even if we change the law, what can we do to ensure some kind of enforcement on the tax code? With all the ways to dodge taxes, it seems we may need someone on it. What should constituents be advocating for?
Well, I think, and I don't know the gentleman's name, it might have been one of the gentlemen was talking about how we need to hire more people in the IRS and that it's been shelled out. We've gotten rid of more and more people, and that's something the Republicans have wanted to do, is get rid of employees in the IRS. The more you have of a good review of people's tax records, the more money that the government will bring in, and it'll be a net positive to the Treasury. But the tax code needs to be respected. The odds of getting audited right now are about slim and none. And if you're Donald Trump, your audit goes on forever, and he's not going to want to pay that $100 billion. I'm amazed he hadn't Bill Barr hadn't told him he could just order it and put it in his account. But no, you could hire more people and have much better enforcement and make it fair, because right now it's not, and wealthy people know it. I had a friend, this is 30, 40 years ago, he used to work for the IRS. He was in private practice. It was the first time I really had to pay any taxes, and I called him up and I was talking about taxes. Steve, you don't understand. He said, your 1040 is your first offer. And that's the way a lot of these people look at it, is the 1040 is their first offer. And if nobody looks at their 1040, then that's what their taxes are. Somebody's got to look at it and say, oh, this guy's making his first offer. This isn't right. We got to make him a counter offer and let him pay what he should. So you need more IRS agents, more enforcement, more prosecutions, and the government needs to be fairly funded, and not by people that pay $750 every 12 or 14 years and think they've done something.
When the rich people who don't want to pay their taxes call their congressman and ask them to defund the police, the congressmen have been listening.
That's exactly right. I knew I'd seen this figure the other day, but I couldn't remember what it was. The top 1% of taxpayers will likely avoid $5 trillion in taxes over the next decade if the IRS does not improve its enforcement. So let's see, what's the first step we take in tackling the political power of billionaires so we can tax them? Who wants to answer that one?
Elect Democrats.
And here's another good one. Are there effective ways to address tax inequity on state and city levels, such as property tax? This is a really important one. Morris, I want maybe you or Eric to hit this. How the federal tax code intersects with state and local, particularly in the middle of COVID when states are out of money, is a really big question for the next folks who are in charge, whoever that happens to be. So Morris, can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, I mean, we don't have all the answers, but the state and the federal governments are completely different. The federal government runs deficits and essentially issues US dollars. The state governments have regular checking accounts like you and I do, and they can't really spend more money than they take in. So a lot of the state governments are between a rock and a hard place, trying to figure out if they're going to increase taxes on somebody, presumably the wealthiest people in their states, or if they're going to cut services, which affects the poor people. And we've been advocating here in New York, where I live, and in other states, for the states to use the powers they have to tax the extremely rich people in their states. Here in New York, we have people who've made billions and billions of dollars just since, and in some cases even because of the COVID pandemic crisis. People, who own large parts of things like Amazon and other companies are doing very well. And I think we have to have our elected officials have enough fortitude, enough bravery to say, look, you people who've done extremely well have to pay your fair share. We cannot just reduce the services we offer to all of the people who have to work for a living in our state. It's not going to work. We can't make money investing in a state with millions of people who can't pay their rent and can't pay their iPhone bills and can't do all the other things they need to do. So we have to make those decisions.
Stephen.
So, let me.
I'd just like to say that since the Reagan era in the early 80s, the country has fallen in love with hating big government and hating paying taxes. And the reality of it is we need big government. We absolutely need big government. Look what's happening right now under COVID. If we didn't have the government jumping in to the tune of $3 or $4 trillion that they have over the last few months, Lord knows where we'd be as a country. And a big government did that. So we only want big government when we need them. And it doesn't work like that. Government has got to be there all the time. It has to be funded. Look, I don't like paying taxes any more than anybody else. I hate to pay taxes, but I love living in the greatest country in the history of mankind. And the fuel that runs the engine known as the United States of America are tax dollars. And if we rob ourselves of that, then she's going to run out of fuel, come sputtering to a halt, and wind up in the ditch. So we got to get back on track and come up with a fair and equitable tax policy that covers all Americans.
So let me echo Steve's comment with saying this. You know, the U.S. government is already running a huge deficit. There are lots of issues and stuff, but what we as a group are focused on is this inequality issue, saying, look, it is certainly true. There's a lot of things going on that for poor and middle class people, your taxes may not be right. Let's start by not making the problem worse. All right. Already the rich are so benefited by the federal tax code. So Erica asked about state and local. Well, I live in New Jersey, and guess what? We have a terribly inequitable system in New Jersey. New Jersey historically has relied very heavily on regressive property taxes. And by the way, property taxes are lower in the rich town that I live in than in the middle class town next door. Well, we haven't solved that problem, but guess what? We do have a Democrat as governor, Phil Murphy, who has just managed to get a tax on millionaires through a legislation that resisted it for years. It's going to be those slow steps, one piece at a time, getting this thing back in balance.
That's the best way to say it. And I think any closing thoughts from anybody, and if not, I'll turn it over to Representative Cohen to finish us up. Anybody closing thoughts? Congressman, go ahead. Let's close this up. Thank you to everybody for being here. Congressman, go ahead.
Well, you're welcome. I think it's really great that I was fortunate to get this is the first day of early, because this was a day when people got out to vote and showed they cared about participating in their government. They're truly patriots to vote and get up early and stand in line. And we need to take our government back. The last, give or take 4 years, has been really a corruption of our system of government and a disrespect to our Constitution. And it's just been awful. I think what Stephen was saying about the country being better, I think it was Oliver Wendell Holmes that said taxes is the price we pay to live in a civilized society, something to that effect. And it is. If you don't pay taxes, you can't have police, you can't have fire, you can't have sanitation, all of those services that we have. And so much of what the government does is for people who are in need, with community health centers. So charitable contributions, the government does charitable contributions because it helps. It just doesn't have a tax deduction in it. And if you raise taxes on people, you keep some type of a charitable deduction, and then people would get even more benefit the higher the tax rate with their deduction. So maybe they give more to charities. But you ought to give for the goodness of your heart and for what's supposed to be, this pure good. And I think most people do give because they want to benefit people that are not as fortunate as they are. But thank you for the Patriotic Millionaires for working against your own personal self-interest. Stephen, I understand what you're saying about those cars. You got 5 cars. I've got, what do I have? I've got 5 cars too. I've got a 79 Cadillac that hardly runs, a 76 Peugeot that does run, an 86 doesn't. an 86 Cadillac that's beautiful and the envy of everybody in Washington. And the 2000 Volvo was my new car.
I won't tell you what mine are.
I bet they're better.
So y'all go to taxtherich.com if you want to put a group together of friends and fans to learn more about the tax code. Please let us know. We'd be happy to do a presentation for y'all. Congressman Cohen, thank you so much again for having us. We so appreciate it. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.